The economic output of a country is measurable. The indicator is gross domestic product, also well known as GDP. GDP is the total value of all goods and services that a country produces and consumes during a whole year. In Austria, for example, nominal GDP was 313 billion euro in 2013, according to the Austrian Statistical Agency. This translates into a GDP per capita of 37,000 euros. In 2014, Europe changes the method of calculation for GDP. The US made these changes already in mid-2013. Statistically, the newly measured GDP for the US was some 2 to 3% higher than the old one, obviously without any real change in the economy of the US. We may therefore expect a similar jump for Europe's GDP. This jump is due to the new calculation method for GDP. The new method of calculation concerns mainly three areas. The biggest change relates to research and development. Prior to 2014, research costs, such as the costs of developing any new medication or any technical innovation, had been entered into the calculation as intermediate products and therefore as an expense of the companies involved. According to the new method, expenses for research and development are now calculated in the GDP as investments. A further change concerns the cultural industry. Up to now, only the direct turnover generated by movies, theater, plays and literature were taken into account as a component of GDP, especially revenues from the sale of tickets, books and CDs. Now royalties are also included by counting them as intangible assets in GDP. The third area concerns military expenditure. Spending on arms and ammunition is no longer recorded as expenses but as investments. Therefore, they raise nominal GDP. This had already been normal accounting practice in the US for quite some time. There, the effect is larger as military expenditure plays a greater role than in Europe. Booking certain monetary flows as investments has several effects. They are no longer just merely recognized as an expense, but also on the asset side of corporate balance sheets. This increases the corporate earnings calculated and possibly also the tax revenues of the state. Furthermore, this way of accounting not only increases GDP for the current year, depreciation and amortization on these investments also raise GDP for the subsequent years. In order to be able to compare economic development over a longer period of time in Europe, the new GDP will also be recalculated for previous years. In the US, the recalculation was done all the way back to the year 1929. GDP is a central reference index. Government debt and budget deficits are given in percentage of GDP. When nominal GDP increases due to the new method of calculation, government debt and deficits do look a little less dramatic. In absolute figures, however, they do not shrink. This is why the new method of GDP calculation seems a bit like official window dressing of the accounts.